Alrighty, g'day everybody. I think it's about time we get started. So for those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Tom and I work with our client engagement team here at aXcelerate. It's very likely that you've spoken to me either while I've been in this role or my time working with the support team. And I'm going to be facilitating this aXcelerate refresher training today. Now, we did have a session earlier in the week on contact management, and today's focus will be on qualification management. Now, on the screen in front of me, you can see the upcoming sessions that we have planned, and these will be rolled out over the coming weeks. So today, we're going to be looking at qualification management, and that can mean a different thing depending on the RTO that you're working for. So we are primarily today going to be looking at how you import accredited qualifications from training.gov.au. We're going to be looking at setting up non-accredited qualifications that you would still like to deliver, as well as non-accredited units of competency. And we're also going to be looking at how to set up what's called a unit of competency only enrolment, which is where you may be delivering an accredited unit of competency that is part of a non-accredited qualification. And finally, we're going to be looking at qualification streams, which is the ability to house multiple of the same qualification in aXcelerate, but treat them as separate qualifications. So to get started, everybody, I'm going to jump into my aXcelerate account, and we're going to be looking at courses and qualifications today. Now, to get started, I'm going to import an accredited work health and safety certificate 4. Now, to get started, I can tell it's an accredited qualification by visiting training.gov.au and typing in the name or the title of this particular qualification, and we can see that it is current. Now, if I go into aXcelerate and I want to add this in, we start with add new qualification. Now, because this is an accredited qual, we can import it directly from training.gov.au, along with all of the associated units of competency and all the information that training.gov.au has to offer. Now, there's two ways we can begin the import. Firstly, we could type in the qualification code, which is what I'm going to be doing today, or we could type in the qualification title. So if I typed in work health and safety, you can see that all of these appear as per training.gov.au. But today I'm going to be typing in the code directly to get the specific unit I want. I've now double-clicked on the result, and we're being confirmed, do we want to automatically import this? The answer is yes, because it's going to save us a whole lot of time. Now we give it a moment to process, and it brings us back to our qualification screen with confirmation that this has been added, and we can see it's been added along here. Now, because this was imported and it's an officially recognized accredited qual, it's also imported all of the associated units of competency. Now, if we go back into this qualification, and we scroll all the way down to the EVETMIS data requirements, which I'm sure a lot of you would know are very important compliance-related fields, it's actually pulled most of this information from training.gov.au, including flagging it as a VET qualification. The only thing that you guys would have to do as the administration team is add the applicable nominal hours to the qualification. Now, scrolling up to the units of competency, it's automatically imported them into aXcelerate. It's automatically attached them to the qualification, but it doesn't set what is a core because that's a job that we have to do. So for example, I'm going to set these first 5 units of competency to core. I'm then going to save this change. And when we preview those same units of competency, you will now see that those 5 are core units. What that means is that when we're creating a class, which we're going to look at in a future session, we're going to automatically include these core units in that class, and we select which electives we would like to add. Now, an interesting thing is, what if we deliver 2 of the same qualification? So we might have a second work health and safety course that has a different suite of electives or different core units. Now, if I go back in to add the qualification and I type in that same code, it's not going to let me import, and it's going to tell me because it already exists. Now, thankfully, there is a way to work around this through a feature called Qualification Streams. Now, before I show you this, it does need to be enabled in your account. So if you hover over System Settings and go into your System Settings, visit the RTO and Vet Settings tab. And if you scroll down to the middle of the page, there's an option here called Qualification Stream Names. Change that to yes and save the settings. So what this does, if I go back to that qualification that I've just added, let's go in here and click on Edit. This field now appears called Qualification Stream. And what this essentially does is adds a suffix to the end of the qualification name to show us that it's really a separate qual with separate units. So for example, I'm going to call this Enrollment Option 1. And I'm going to go down and save this change. Now we give this a moment to think, and what it's going to do here is you'll see that it's now essentially renamed it to add Enrollment Option 1 afterwards, but it's still using the same qualification code. So when it comes to reporting time, we're still going to be reporting that they are accredited qualifications, and we're simply differentiating the two in terms of setting up from the aXcelerate side. So now that I've added this qualification stream, let's try add this same qualification back in. So keeping in mind last time I did this, it told me it couldn't be added. It's now, just like we saw originally, going to add this as expected. We can now see that the same qualification is in here twice, but they're 2 different names. Now, I always recommend going in and naming the second qualification something in the qualification stream. So I'm going to call this Enrollment Option 2. Let's go down and submit. Now, in this option, I'm not going to add any cause. Let's submit. Now, what this means is that when we're creating a class, we can select either of these qualifications. And depending on which one we select, we'll change the electives that we bring across because we've set up 2 different situations there. Now, that's the accredited qualification side. Let's have a look at setting up a non-accredited qualification. So this is just an example that I'm making up on the spot. So let's say that I am a business that delivers photography-related courses, but none of these are accredited. They're just courses that I host, and people can come sign up for $100 for a class, and we're going to have a look at some basic photography. Now, what I'm going to do is add a qualification, and we're going to call this basic, if I can type, basic photography. There we go. And the qualification code is simply going to be BP. Now, these won't get reported on as long as we tick a unit of competency enrollment only. Now, if you want the technical explanation, it's here on the screen, but the too long didn't read equivalent is we're telling aXcelerate that this isn't a real qualification, which means it's not going to be included in our VETMIS reporting. So it's purely an internal qualification, and the students, when they study it, they're not leaving with an official accredited qual. They're going to be leaving with a certificate that we have created for them. So unit of competency enrollment only is crucial for non-accredited qualifications. Now, I'm going to click, I like to untick vet flag as well, even though it's already an internal qualification. I'm also going to change this to other course. Again, it's not necessary because it's not being reported on, but for continuity of information, I certainly recommend it. Now let's submit this. Now, if we look at our basic photography qualification, there's no units of competency. To add them, we click back in and there's the ability to add some units of competency. Now, before we can do this, the units need to be in aXcelerate, but we haven't yet set them up. If these were accredited units we were bringing across, we could simply type the name in here and it would import them, much like we were looking at with qualifications. Because these are non-accredited units, I'm going to create these now and come back and link them to the qualification after. So let's go to courses and units of competency. And we're going to add a new unit of competency. Now I'm going to call this Introduction to Photography. I'm just going to call this ITP. Now, if we wanted to charge students for this and we had invoicing set up in aXcelerate, we could enter the value here, but for simplicity, I'm going to continue with $0. If we wanted this to be this unit to be reviewed in 12 months, we would write here. This doesn't stop the unit from being usable. It simply it shows a flag warning you that it's outside of the expiry period, or outside of the validity period, I should say. Again, I am going to leave this blank. If you had online enrollments and this was appearing on your website, you could enter information in here. Now, the important step that I want to bring your attention to is unit of competency type. By default, it always says accredited, but we want it to be internal. Let's click on that. Purely makes it non-accredited. I'm going to click on submit. And now let's add another unit of competency. It's also non-accredited, and I'm going to call it photographing nature. Why can't I type today, guys? It's because I'm under the pump. There we go. I'm going to call this PN. Now, I'm going to change that to internal as well, and we're going to submit this. So we have just added 2 non-accredited units of competency, and I'm now going to link them to the photography qualification we created, basic photography. I've clicked on edit, and we're going to go in and click on the add sum button, which allows us to search for the existing units of competency within aXcelerate. So I'm now going to type in BP, press enter. I think I need to actually type in minimum 3 characters. So I'm going to type in, it was introduction, that's right. Introduction to photography is what I'm looking for. Oh, let's try that again. I think I jumped the gun with my pressing of enter. I'm going to say that this is a core elective because that way it's going to automatically be included when we create the class, and I'm going to submit. You'll now see confirmation at the top of your screen that this was successfully added to the qualification. Now let's look for the other one, photographing nature. I'm also going to call this a core, and we're going to submit this. Let's navigate back to the qualification. I'm going to click on edit, and you'll now see that these 2 units of competency have been included in the qualification. So this is the simplest method to setting up non-accredited qualifications and ensuring you're avoiding compliance errors when running your VETMIS reporting at the end of the year. Now, finally, there is one other situation that I want to run you guys through. Now, let's say that I'm a first aid provider, and a year ago, someone came to my organization and they studied a certificate in first aid. Now, as part of that, we require yearly refresher training to ensure the student is keeping their knowledge up to the medical standard. Now, what we could do is when they're running their refresher training, there isn't actually an accredited qualification for it. I, as the organization, might want to host, for example, a refresher course on the CPR unit of competency. What that means is that the student isn't coming to me to study a qualification. They're actually coming to study a unit of competency and get given a statement of attainment at the end of that. Now, the interesting part is when we go to create a class, it needs, as part of the first step, a qualification. So if there's no qualification, but we need to enroll people in an accredited unit, how do we do that? We do it with a unit of competency only enrollment. Now, I'm going to go back to qualifications and I'm going to add a new qualification. Let's call this CPR refresher. I'm going to call this CPRR. And just like we did with non-accredited quals, we're clicking unit of competency in enrollment only. Again, what this does is it will exclude this qualification from your reporting, meaning it's purely internal. We're essentially making an empty shell that's going to be housing genuine accredited units of competency. Now, just like I recommended earlier, I'm going to change these two fields here to show that it's not accredited, even though it's not particularly necessary, and I'm going to create it. You can now see our CPR refresher is in the list, but there's no units of competency. Now, just like we did earlier, let's add some. Now, these will already be in aXcelerate, but because these are accredited units of competency, we could type them in here. So for example, I'm going to type in CPR, see if anything comes up. Forgive my ignorance with the world of first aid. I'm going to say HLTAID. There we go, that looks like it. I'm going to call that a core unit, HLTAID. Emergency response, let's add that as a core. And I'm going to go back into the qualification. So what we've done here is we've added accredited units to a non-accredited qualification. What that means is that when we're setting up a class, we're able to select this qualification. The qualification, because it's not real, doesn't get reported on, but we can still report that we have delivered genuine accredited units of competency to particular students. Now, guys, that's actually the session today completed and everything that I would like to cover. So, guys, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate this was a faster session than normal because there wasn't as much content to get through today. So I appreciate your diligence sticking around and listening. I'm going to end the session here, but we do have a little bit of time for Q&A afterwards. So guys, thank you very much for your time. If you would like to hang around and have the opportunity to ask me some questions, by all means, I will still be here for another 5 to 10 minutes. But otherwise, guys, thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great day.